All right, well, let me give you a few instructions. Number one is to stay on mute unless you want to speak. And the most effective way to let us know you want to speak is down at the bottom. There should be a reactions, a little thing you click on for reactions, and there's a raise hand bar. And if you click on that, like I just did, it actually brings you to the front, to the first screen with your hand raised up, so that even if you're on screen number 5, we see that. The only disadvantage of that is then you have to click on that same thing to lower your hand. So don't click on the clapping hand, which is this one. If you see me, you see it, because that just means you want to give somebody applause, and we don't need to use up time doing that. And that'll disappear on its own. So raise your hand and it'll spotlight you. Again, stay muted unless you want to speak. And if you have a problem finding the raising hand, start waving or unmute and holler at me that you have something you need to say. But otherwise, we'll try to keep it really civil. We have a number of votes to take. Hopefully, one vote on the recommended bylaws, as opposed to word by word, sentence by sentence, and phrase by phrase. They come recommended to you from the trustees and from the session intact, but we'll certainly have a chance to talk about those. One vote on the slate of endowment fund board of managers as presented, one vote for that. But there will be individual votes on the terms of call for the pastors, because it needs to be recorded that way in the minutes. When we do polling, I think Lynn is ready with the polls. We will take the vote twice on each one of those questions, because we have a good number of devices where there are 2 people. And so we need to make sure both of them get to vote. So we're trusting you that if there's only one person on your device, don't vote the second time. That's for people who have another person working on a device who want to vote, and we'll do that electronically. And I want to say thanks to Lynn for getting our technology squared away so we can do this both over Zoom and in Spelman Hall. To Ed McFalls and Barb Drain and Lynn for the materials and the reports, and for getting all that stuff together, and the links and the email to everybody, to Ann McNally and Robbie Healy and Jeff Smith for being willing to do congregational meetings on Zoom. It's just a crazy time. And for all of you who are joining us, this is just a blessing to be able to be together. And as is in our case before, we have more robust attendance at congregational meetings online than any other time. It's easy for us. So any questions? Raise your hand if you have a question. Otherwise, I'll start us with a word of prayer. Okay. Let's pray. And I'm going to use the opening verse of a favorite hymn to lead us into this time. O Lord, you give the great commission to heal the sick and preach the word, lest the church neglect its mission and the gospel go unheard. Help us witness to your purpose with renewed integrity. With the Spirit's gifts, empower us for the work of ministry. We pray all this for the sake of the gospel and the sake of the church you call us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, let me move my screen a little bit here. So, state of the church. Really? It's like, oh man. Usually I do an annual update of stats and stuff, baptisms and deaths. Thankfully, we have more baptisms than deaths this year. Although I think it's probably because we saved up a lot of baptisms during COVID. But anyway, I'll make a few remarks, and I'm not going to do the kind of little bits and pieces of the year, just some broad strokes. I said in my letter in the annual report, if you haven't read it, that this is one of the happiest, healthiest, and most faithful, I didn't have that part, but most faithful large mainline congregations I know. And that That is a state of the church that gives me great joy to describe. And it's really a tribute to you, the members. What I love about this church, the members, you do not major in the minors. Throughout my time here, I've witnessed that Westminster has avoided worrying about the minuscule concerns that some congregations spend hours, days, months, or even years arguing or fussing over. You major in the majors, the intersection of the gospel with the world, and how it is we can best rally our resources to share the good news of Jesus Christ, even if it means bucking the trends, swimming against the current, venturing into unknown territory. This congregation continues to exhibit bold confidence in the leading of God's Spirit. And as we've said multiple times, it seems that it's been in this congregation's DNA ever since the very beginning. Many of you know 30 years ago, this congregation voted to move to this location. A radical shift. But that move poised this congregation to take advantage of some of the most robust decades of population growth this county had ever seen. While county growth virtually stopped with the market downturn of 2008, 2009, by then Westminster was established as a regional congregation known throughout the community for its worship, its music, its preschool, its Sunday school for all ages, its outreach, leadership and community ministries, and in its international partners with adults, and as John mentioned this morning, it serves international partnerships with youth creating engagement. I'd like to reflect on some things that have changed. 25 years ago, Westminster, like a lot of Presbyterian congregations, had communion on 6 Sundays plus Maundy Thursday and Ash Wednesday, about 8 times a year. Communion at Westminster is now celebrated more than 80 times a year, more than 10 times what used to be typical of Presbyterians. Weekly chapel communion on Easter and Christmas Eve, monthly Taizé, as well as all through Lent and Advent in our contemporary service usually. 15 years ago, rather than allow a nearby church to simply close when its membership had dwindled to a handful, Westminster invested in the Doortown Community Church adventure, establishing a new worshiping community a mile and a half down the road. One of the many results of that adventure was the opportunity for and training of an associate pastor to lead that campus of worshipers, who has since become one of the youngest heads of staff with congregations over 2,000 members, and who 12 years later is leading a flagship congregation in Atlanta engaged in a $45 million capital campaign to enlarge the scope of ministry in that city. And some of you may recall when the Doortown ministry was consolidated back to the main campus, we gave a thriving preschool from that site, lock, stock, and barrel, equipment, teachers, students, to a Methodist church, Bethlehem United Methodist, a congregation anxious to gain younger families to broaden their ministry. The sale of the Doortown property reduced our debt on the 7 additional acres of land we had purchased concurrent with that outreach. Land that may bear new and surprising ministry opportunities in the years to come. 6 years ago, a couple members engaged in a conversation with me and connected to the vision of being able to broadcast our worship over the internet. They recognized that the investment, the cost, and the infrastructure to do so could expand our ministry, keep members connected even when home, recovering from surgery, or traveling away from the area. It wasn't long before we began to call Marist Grove, Westminster South, Wellington, and White Forks satellite campuses. Little did those couple members in that initial conversation, or really the rest of us, know how beneficial it would be for us to have live streaming in our wheelhouse when less than 3 years after we started broadcasting, our entire ministry would be online due to a pandemic. Those congregations shut down adult faith development during the summer months. Westminster's had preaching and teaching series on Romans, Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians, Genesis, the Heidelberg Catechism, creeds of the church, the book of Acts, the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed. I don't know how many others there are. Serious studies and deep engagement in the summer. And now with hybrid, we're able to do even more with that. Over and over, this congregation has led so much I can talk about. Multiple members and staff who've gone to seminary, who've not shied away from challenging issues like same-gender marriage or systemic racism. We've been a host to blood drives, COVID tests for the community during this pandemic. And now succession planning, along with a very small handful of other congregations. Westminster is leading the way in transition of leadership for healthy congregations. Transition that doesn't require the loss of momentum and engagement, that sometimes takes place during an interim period of a lengthy search for a new head of staff. All that to say in snippets, the state of the church. This church is ready, able, and willing, as it has been throughout its history, poised to continue to follow God's lead into the next chapter. Thanks be to God. I've had the privilege of being in your midst these 22 years. Thank you for inviting me on your journey. Okay. That's enough for me. We have honors to retiring leaders, and I don't even know who's on here. I haven't gone through all the screens yet. But retiring elders, Laura Davis, Gary Haddell, Monica Justice, Bert Rothenberger. Is anybody here? Many of those folks are here. Can you raise your hand? Deacons. Oh, there's Bert. There's Bert. I see him up in the corner. Thanks, Bert. Thanks for your service. Deacons, Sue Rugel. I saw her on earlier. I don't know which screen. Demery Hopkins, Sue Johnson, Kathy McGee, Pam Rappel, Patricia Sandy, and Nancy Stanga. Any of those folks? See the spotlight. See if things trying to help people. And trustees John Hines and Greg Townsend. To all of you for the multiple years of service you have given to this congregation, particularly during some of the most challenging years, these pandemic years. We thank you for your leadership, for your service, for your gifts. We know, like most folks, you don't disappear. You find other ways to be used and use God's calling to you in service to the church, but we want to thank you for your willingness to respond to the call and be a leader and give your time and energy to the life of this congregation. Friends, for all those officers. And now, unless there's objection, we will recess the meeting of the congregation, something we hope never to have to do again if you approve the bylaw changes. This is one of those strange things that I've never seen before, but if it's the way our bylaws are written. And I actually found a church outside of Pittsburgh that does the same thing. So we're not alone in this. It must be a Pennsylvania thing. But we'll recess the meeting of the congregation and convene the meeting of the corporation. And McNally, President of the Trustees, present to us. Nan's presenting from the Zoom room in Spelman Jr. So there you go.
Okay. Now, can you hear me now? The proverbial.
We can.
Okay. Thanks, Doc.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Everyone in the room, go keep quiet so that.
All right. Technology. Okay. Good afternoon. How are you? It's my honor to present to you the trustees report of financial results for 2021, as well as the property reserve and our budget for 2022. All right. All right. Like the rest of us, in 2021, COVID continued to present Westminster with challenges despite the return to in-person worship in May. This meant we continued to limit the scope of activities such as retreats and much of our mission work. Specifically in the general fund, pledge giving, which funds the lion's share of our operation, totaled $1,874,000. This was 98% of what we had planned, so thanks to all of you who kept up with your pledges. Total revenues of $2,163,000 were lower than the budget by $192,000. This reflects a shortfall in other giving and the absence of mission-related activities. Total expenses were less than budget by $248,000 as we reduced spending for operations as much as we could. These sensible decisions resulted in a surplus of $56,000, which we put aside to protect us against unforeseen adverse impacts that may come up in 2022. The Property Committee does a great job of overseeing the prudent investment in our campus, with an eye not just to immediate needs, but planning for the years to come as well. Now that our building is almost 30 years old, major building systems are in need of replacement. This year, we made substantial improvements and repairs in air purification and the systems which heat and cool the building. We also replaced aging windows and doors in the Heckert Wing, administration, and the preschool. These investments will help us to reduce utility costs in the future. Property reserves for future investments in mechanical systems and technology are part of the 2022 budget. So turning to the budget. With the challenges in staffing that we know are coming this year and the uncertainty of COVID's lingering effects, we carefully plan for a budget based on key assumptions, including a return of mission activities, as well as changes in staffing and needed spending on the building. Given the results of the 2022 pledge campaign, we prepared a budget which is a bit smaller than the 2021 plan. The budget projects total revenues of $2,299,000, which will support programs including staff and related expenses necessary to deliver programs such as worship, spiritual growth, and youth and young adult activities. This represents about 57% of the budget. Outreach to organizations in the community is about 12% of the budget, and property reserves, maintenance, and other overhead take up the remainder. In a few minutes, you'll be asked to vote on the revised bylaws, which, among other things, addresses our decision to engage an outside firm to audit our financial procedures. Given the size of our operations, including the general fund, preschool, thrift shop, and endowment, trustees believe that this is a prudent decision. Once again, in 2020, the auditors found no exception with our financial operation and were complimentary of our strong financial procedures. And in closing, I want to take a second to recognize the fabulous work that Jerry McShane and his staff have done throughout the year. They've worked tirelessly to support the workings of the church, and we are eternally grateful for all that they do every day with dedication and professionalism. So that concludes my prepared remarks. Are there any questions that anybody has of me? You may raise your hand, and Don will let me know if they. Any questions, Don?
I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand, Dan.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. If you have any questions, my email is goodchoutpa@verizon.net, and I'm out on the realm. So don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Great report. Thanks for your leadership. trustees. Mr. Clerk, would you like to walk us through the bylaws?
Thanks, Don. As Ann mentioned, the trustees several years ago decided to go to an outside auditing firm to review our books and records because of the complexity. And this past summer, one of our trustees, Paul Larson, suggested that we should change our bylaws to reflect that. He proposed some language. Several of us started noodling around with the bylaws a little bit, and then Don Lincoln raised his question about the way the church operated as a congregation separate from being a corporation and the way we handle these meetings and so forth. So we decided a broader look at the bylaws might be in order. And we formed an ad hoc committee consisting of 2 trustees, Ann McNally and Paul Larson, 2 elders, Diane DeSino Lane and Gary Liddick, and then Don Lincoln and myself as the other members. And we kind of thoroughly reviewed the bylaws, and with the exception of 2 items, which is Article 2, Paragraph 6 regarding a quorum, and Article 4, Paragraph 4 regarding the financial review that Ann just talked about, all of the changes, and there's lots of them, and a lot of them are just minor word things or whatever, but all of the changes are to do three things: address and accomplish our goal of combining our ecclesiastical and corporate functions into a single governing document, and then provide some specific requirements as set forth in the Book of Order, which is 1/2 of the PCUSA's Constitution. And then third, to recognize our historical practices, the way we have been doing church for decades and decades. So there are many changes, but they all are to accomplish those 3 things, other than the change in the quorum and the financial review, which has turned out to be very helpful. The quorum change, when we went to virtual church and our attendance exploded, it just became virtually impossible to achieve a quorum. So we've suggested a change not related to our online attendance, but rather a percentage of the book membership of the church. So we've changed the quorum a couple of times over the years. It reflects sort of the challenge of getting a bunch of people together when a large church meets in multiple services in time. So we feel this is needed to make it more achievable. So those are the bylaws, the changes. I hope you had a chance to review them. And if there's any questions about those, if there isn't, then I guess Lynn would be able to put up our question.
So let me ask if there are questions. If you have a question, raise your hand electronically, and we'll try to get an answer. It's a lot of insertions and deletions, but it really is cleaning up some practice. And there's Paul. Is that you who wants to speak?
We have a quorum today.
We would have a quorum with the change, but because of the reported amount of virtual attenders for last year, we do not have 20% of that number. But if we make the change, then we have a quorum.
Is that a problem?
I would say not, because of the practical realities are we made that change a few years ago, and it just, we can, if we need to, we can endorse the actions of this at the next meeting when we will definitely have a quorum.
By the rules of 20% of worshiping, our average worship attendance that we used to follow, which was people in the building, we absolutely have a quorum related to the numbers we used to have when we were just meeting in person. That was you know, that worked pretty well for us. So by those little rules, we were sort of in concert with what our practice was until we hit COVID. And reported 2,600 last year for our average worship attendance, which was just astounding. And this year's report is 1,700. That's like Christmas and Easter. Other questions? Seeing none, I'm assuming you're ready to vote on the bylaws intact. So Lynn, you want to run the poll, and remember, it'll run twice. And I'm hoping everybody, well, we still got a couple trickling in. Okay, do you want to run the vote again, Lynn? There it is for second persons. Give it just a few seconds more, and I'll record those. Good. Thank you, Lynn. And that poll. And the results of that are 100, let's see, 167 in favor, nobody against, and no abstentions. Ed, when was the last time we had 167 people vote on anything? Probably the last time we voted on receiving a pastor.
Exactly.
Or when we have a rolling meeting of the elders. Thank you all, and thanks for taking the time to read through the bylaws. I was grateful that it even got raised, that Ed brought up some of this, and the audit issue raised it. It's one thing I can leave. I can leave clean for a new head of staff, and you can have in place for a new head of staff, which is great. Anything else on that, Ed?
Nope, we're good. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good, excellent, thank you. And thanks to the bylaws crew, the great group of folks who spent some time, including Zoom time and in-person time, walking through bylaws. Governance isn't always the easiest thing, but we improved our status and standing. So I think that's all we have for corporate business. So unless there is objection, we will recess the meeting of the corporation for the last time. Yay. And reconvene as the congregation, which next time will be congregation and corporation, one and the same, able to do whatever business we have. And the first thing we have is Robbie Healy, who's the president of the Endowment Fund Board of Managers. Robbie, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate the privilege of being able to speak on behalf of the Endowment Fund Board of Managers. We have a really robust group that are dedicated to the stewardship of money entrusted to the congregation by others. And this year was an interesting year. We had slightly fewer proposals and distributed slightly less money, but we still had 14 proposals and we distributed almost $75,000. Our full report is on page 14 of the annual report if you haven't yet looked at that. Our fund grows because of members or friends of the congregation who choose to put gifts into the endowment fund. And of course, you can do a bequest or a gift to the congregation that doesn't go into the endowment fund, and we're always mindful of that. But this year we had an exceptionally good year, which means there were deaths that we benefited from, which is never a happy occasion, but it is a wonderful occasion when their stewardship beyond their lifetime includes remembering the endowment fund. So a $45,000 bequest we received, as well as the first gift that came through a charitable gift annuity done recently. The charitable gift annuity program of Westminster is administered in partnership with the Chester County Community Foundation. So the $121,000 charitable gift annuity transferred into our fund at the Community Foundation. We are very grateful that the session and the trustees are working with an external auditor. We have benefited greatly from their insights into our best practice. And one of our primary infrastructure discussions this year was around how we will account for and use the funds from external funds. In other words, funds such as the Community Foundation or other trusts where the endowment fund is a beneficiary, but we do not hold those funds. So Rob Nickersomer, our treasurer, has worked very closely with the auditor and with staff to align our procedures with best practice audit and accounting, and we're very grateful for that. The other thing that we have worked very hard on is discernment around ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors within the funds in which we invest. And obviously, we are balancing the need for a return with the need for fund managers and investment options that are in line with our mission. So our investment review annually now includes an ESG discussion. And when I make this report next year, I will be reporting to you on the first transactions that we made that reflected a better balance on our ESG. So we're very mindful of stewardship that generates sufficient return, but that also is consistent with our mission priorities. Lastly, we had transitions among our members. Marty Bonds completed her term of service and we honored her dedication to our work. And our nominating committee identified Amanda Lawn as an individual whose skills, abilities, and interests could complement the Endowment Fund Board, and she accepted an opportunity to work with us. And in a moment, the moderator is going to ask you to vote on that transition. We also have a youth member, and the youth member is elected by the board in the summertime. The youth member's term is consistent with the academic year. So Joey Braun has been serving with us. He succeeded Jessica Buckley, who served 2 years with us. And in a moment, you're going to be asked to confirm our election of Joey. We also we benefit from a direct relationship with the Board of Trustees. And although our trustee liaison is not elected by the congregation, they are appointed by the Board of Trustees. This year, Greg Townsend finished 2 years of service with us. And we are very grateful for his very significant contributions to our work and serving in that liaison role. So I'm very happy to take any questions members may have for the Endowment Board.
Any questions? If you have one for Robbie, please raise your hand electronically if you can.
I'm assuming Lynn is scouring the screens to determine whether someone has a hand raised. I should also have mentioned succeeding Greg Townsend, Chuck Lambing from the Board of Trustees will now also be working with us.
Great, good.
So one last commercial message. If you're active with a nonprofit organization, we beg, urge, cajole, ask that you consider requesting a grant from the Endowment Fund Board of Managers. Rich Birkenmeyer, our vice president, is a resource for you if you are concerned about completing the application. But every proposal we receive and review is sponsored by a Westminster member. So unless and until you lift up mission opportunities for us to support, we don't have them. So I would urge you to be prayerful about considering nominating a nonprofit with which you work or are aware, and lift up those opportunities to us. And thank you again for the opportunity to represent the Endowment Fund Board this afternoon.
Thank you, Robbie, for a great report. And with thanks to Marty and Jessica and Greg for their service, we'll now have a poll. And again, the poll will run twice to vote on the slate of folks as presented for service on the Endowment Fund Board of Managers. Go ahead, Lynn. Okay. Run that poll again then. And second users on devices. Okay. Motion passes with 161 votes. And I'll just piggyback one more thing on Robbie's report and say that those of you who have already made it known to the church that Westminster is including in your will, you'll be receiving a letter from me soon about your role as a member of our legacy society at Westminster. And one of the things we're hoping to do is make sure we have a good record of where you would like a legacy gift to go. There are a variety of places, funds that are left in bequest can be utilized in the life of the church. And we want to make sure if you want a bequest to go to the endowment fund, that we know that, or if you want it to go in some other direction. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll be talking a little more about legacy giving in the coming months. Looking forward to that. Thanks again, Robbie, for your good work. Next is a vote on terms of call. And Jeff Smith, who's chair of the Personnel Committee, will handle this. And I will drop off and somebody will, I guess, Ed or somebody will buzz my phone. And thanks, Ed. I see him waving his hand, and I'll let my colleagues know as well.
Thank you, Don. So as Don indicated, I'm a member of Westminster's Personnel Committee, which is responsible for overseeing the church's personnel policies and procedures. And one of the responsibilities for the committee each year is to develop and recommend changes to terms of call for our pastors for the coming year. Now, there are a number of factors that we consider when doing so. We consider the contribution that each of the 4 pastors has made to the life of the church over the past year. We rely on salary data from churches around the country to understand how individuals with similar experience and responsibilities are paid. We obviously have to work within the parameters of the church's budget for the upcoming year. This year, the budget allows for an average salary increase of between 2 and 3% over the last year across the entire staff, not just the pastors. And we also need to ensure that there is equity between the pastoral staff and the non-ordained staff when salaries are adjusted each year. So at the end of the day, we feel that the recommendations that are being put before you represent a fair balance of these various factors. So let's turn to the terms of call that are being recommended for 2022. If you didn't notice, or hopefully you did, the materials that were presented prior to this meeting, there was an electronic document regarding the terms of call. If you take, not necessarily now, but at some point, if you take a look at the second page of that document, it goes into a fair amount of detail about the various elements of each pastor's terms of call. So if you're interested in a little more detail, I would encourage you to read that at some point. But I will quickly, outline them or summarize them for folks in case you're not familiar. So if I turn to the terms of call for Don Lincoln, take a look at that, you'll notice that each pastor's terms of call are broken out into 3 major areas. The first one is their effective salary, or their, if you notice on the 4th line down, their total effective salary. For Don, we're recommending a total effective salary of $159,836. This is really the salary that the church is paying to the pastor for the year. Each pastor has the ability to designate some amount of that to go towards a housing allowance. I believe there are tax advantages to them for doing that. There's also a line for deferred compensation, which represents the amount that the pastor would like to go into their 403B plan. But again, those are decisions that the pastor makes, and it really has no bearing on the bottom line of the church. The next grouping is benefits, including participation in the pension plan, death and disability insurance, medical insurance. Those are benefits that are required, by PCUSA, and the cost of them is set by PCUSA. So we really don't have control over them, in terms of the dollar amount. But so you'll see for each pastor a total benefit subtotal, which in Don's case is $49,464. And then finally, you'll see a number of miscellaneous items under the heading of reimbursements. And these are really expenses that the church has to pay as part of each pastor, performing the duties that we expect them to perform. So some examples of that is the cost of continuing education programs, automobile allowance, the employer's share of Social Security and Medicare that the churches are required to pay. Those are some examples of those reimbursements. And if you add them all up, in Don's case, it comes to a total of $31,675. So if you then take those 3 subtotals and add them together, Don's total cost or total terms of call for the 2022 year is $240,975. So that's just a quick summary of the various elements of the terms of call. So, in a minute, I'm going to be bringing to you a motion regarding 2022 terms of call. This comes from the Personnel Committee, and was unanimously recommended by session during their January meeting. And the motion, there will actually be 4 of them. We're each pastor, we're gonna have a separate motion. And so each motion will be that you approve the terms of call for each pastor. So let's take each pastor one at a time, starting with Don. As you know, Don is our head of staff. He joined Westminster in the year 2000. I already went through and summarized his terms of call. So we're recommending total terms of call of $240,975 for this year, including 5 weeks of paid vacation, including 5 Sundays, and 2 weeks of study leave.
There's a question, Jeff.
Okay, I was just about to pause and ask, are there any questions on the terms in general or in Don's terms in particular?
A simple question, Jeff. Is this an annualized? Oh, he will retire. Is he being paid after he retires?
No, this is an annualized number. So I don't know that Don has set an exact date, but if he were to retire effectively June 30th, his cost to the church would effectively be approximately half of that amount.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I guess we're ready to vote on Don's terms of call. Lynn, I guess you'll put the poll on the screen. I think I see it. Do I see a question from Sue Brugel? Sue, if
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you could, for each pastor, just let us know if this is a percent increase or, that relevance.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I should have mentioned that. So in Don's case, his terms of call represent a 2% increase over 2021. Thank you. Okay, any other questions before we get to the poll? Okay, Lynn?
Yes.
Yes.
I know we need to do this a second time. I can't see the results coming in, so I'm not sure at what point we put the poll up a second time. Okay, there we go. I see the poll's up a second time. So if there's a second person on a device, this is the time to vote. Ed, are you able to see the results so we'll know?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I guess whenever they stop trickling in, just let us know.
Okay, I'm ending it in.
Ed, does it look like the results have stopped trickling in?
Yes, it does. And other than just a couple of no's, it's almost unanimously in favor.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's turn to Jenny's terms of call. Jenny, as you know, is our associate pastor for spiritual growth. She joined Westminster in the year 2015. Her recommended total effective salary will be $80,805, which represents a 2% increase over last year. Total benefits would come to $29,898. Total reimbursements of $15,943 for a total cost of terms of $126,646. We further promise 4 weeks plus 2 days of paid vacation, including 4 Sundays, and 2 weeks of study leave. So any questions about Jenny's terms of call before we run the poll? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So Lynn, you want to go ahead and do the poll for Jenny's terms?
Okay, I think we can turn the second one now, Lynn. Okay, Jeff, that's finished now too. And nearly unanimously in favor.
Okay, great. Okay, let's turn to Ann Hatfield's terms. Ann, as you know, is our associate pastor for pastoral care and outreach and joined Westminster in the year 2011. We're recommending a total effective salary of $76,805, which represents a 3% increase from last year. If you recall earlier, I mentioned that one of the things we look at in developing recommendations is data from churches around the country to understand how our pastors' salaries compare to their peers. And in Ann's case, as well as John Frost's case in a minute, both of their current salaries appear to leave them a little bit below where they should be based on that data. And so that's why we're recommending a 3% increase for Ann. Total benefits for Ann of $28,418. Total reimbursements of $15,175 for a total of $120,398, along with 4 weeks plus 2 days of paid vacation, including 4 Sundays, and 2 weeks of paid study leave. So any questions regarding Ann's recommended terms? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So Lynn, you want to go ahead and run?
Okay, Lynn, I think we can invite the people to do the second. Okay, that one also passed, Jeff.
Okay, great. All right, and then finally, we have John Frost. John is our associate pastor for worship who joined Westminster in the year 2004. The effective salary that's being recommended for John is $71,790, which represents a 3% increase from 2021. Benefits would come to $26,562. Reimbursements, $12,135 for a total of $110,487, along with 4 weeks plus 2 days of paid vacation, including 4 Sundays, and 2 weeks of study leave. Now, any questions on John's terms? If not, I think we're ready for the poll.
Okay, Lynn, you want to put up a second? Oh, one more. Okay, and that one passes too, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Well, Lynn and Ed, thanks for your help. And
I'll
my
go let
thanks.
them know.
Okay, my thanks to everyone who participated for taking time out of your Sunday to help us out with this. So I guess I would also say, when you have an opportunity, I'd encourage you to thank each or all of the 4 pastors for all the hard work that they do for us as a congregation.
My colleagues.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. No surprise, everyone's terms were approved, and we're all very grateful for all that you've done for us, especially over the past year, but throughout your careers with Westminster. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, congregation. We do a couple dozen years like this one. Not. Thank you for your support and the things you provide for us, vacation and continuing education, that we can get a break, and for the way in which you enable us to do and be, and we all feel so fortunate to serve this congregation. Okay, there's nothing else with that, then Mr. McFalls, the clerk, it's all yours.
Thanks, Don. Just 2 more things to do here, and one is to review the statistics, which were on page 5 of the annual report. There was some up and some down, but we had a net increase of 7 members to the church in 2021. So all said, that's a good year, a good turnout. So we now, at the end of the year, we had a total of 1,928 members. Questions on the statistics? Okay, seeing none, on to the necrology report, which is the list of persons that Westminster returned to the church triumphant in 2021. And just read the names and reflect on the loss that we experienced by the passing of these individuals. Phil Hoffman, Margaret Rice, Jean Weller, Bill Hocker, Louisa Young, Skip Guthrie, Fred Finke, Margaret Bovard, Frank McCorkle, Jean Hillenbrand, Trudy Rossiter, Rick Mainwaring, Alice Humphrey, Barbara Hanson, Martha Liotta, Connie Fleming, Leonard Starkey, Charles R.B. Beckman, Ben Bayless, Jan Davis, Bob Ranieri. Just have a moment of silence to remember these individuals that contributed to our church so richly. Thank you. And Don, that completes the necrology report and my contribution.
And Ed, thanks for your continued great service as clerk of session in the life of this congregation. You do an incredible amount of work for Westminster. So is there any other business that we need to do?
It's not.
And members of the congregation, anything else? Anybody raising their hand? A motion would be in order to adjourn. I see hands being raised. Yeah, all those in favor, wave, thumbs up, some sign, yay, even in Spellman Jr. All right, I'm gonna do something really stupid now. And that's it. I'm gonna invite you to sing the doxology with me. If you wanna unmute and turn it into chaos, let's do it.
Okay.
Great.
You know what the heck, it'll be what it'll be. You just you gotta stay on your own. I'm gonna start there, right there. Praise God.
A joyful noise.
I love it. You know, that's what ministry is like sometimes. Utter chaos, but the gifts, the abundant gifts of this congregation continue to pour out in so many places. And thank you for being the place I've been able to serve more than half my career. It has been such a blessing. Blessings, friends. Thanks again. Thanks for coming on today.
You're a blessing to us, Don.